The red dust of New Haven swirled around Tom Walsh's boots as he knelt beside the strange metallic object his plow had unearthed. 300 years of farming this land, his family had worked these fields, and never once had they found anything but rocks and old roots. Now, half buried in the crimson soil, lay something that gleamed with an otherworldly shine. Tom brushed away the dirt with calloused fingers. The metal felt warm to the touch, smoother than anything the Dominion factories produced. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, symbols that looked almost familiar. His grandfather had shown him pictures once, back when such things were still allowed. Pictures of the old ships, the human ships, before the aliens came and took everything away. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years, long before humans had even learned to make fire. 4 species working together, each one more advanced than anything Earth had ever produced. The reptilian hegemony controlled the military with their massive warships and brutal efficiency. The crystalline collective managed all resources and technology with perfect mathematical precision. The gaseous consortium handled communications across the galaxy through their psychic networks. The insectoid swarm oversaw labor and production with countless workers who never tired or complained. When humans first reached the stars in 2087, they had been welcomed. For exactly 15 years. Then came the assessment when the Dominion declared humanity a developmental risk to galactic stability. The war that followed lasted 3 days. Earth surrendered when the aliens threatened to crack the planet in half. Now humans lived on agricultural worlds like New Haven, growing food for alien bellies while their own children went hungry. They worked the mines on airless rocks while aliens lived in crystal palaces. They fixed the machines that kept alien cities running while their own settlements crumbled. And if they complained, if they caused trouble, entire planets simply disappeared from the star maps. Tom had grown up hearing whispers of the old days, stories passed down in secret about human heroes who had fought impossible battles among the stars. His great-grandfather had been there, at the final battle over Titan's Gate, where humanity's last fleet had made their desperate stand. Most of those ships had been destroyed, but some said a few had escaped into the dark between galaxies, waiting for the day when they could return. Old stories, fairy tales to help children sleep better in their thin blankets. But this metal fragment was real. Tom pried it loose from the soil and carried it back to his small farmhouse. His wife, Maria, looked up from mending their son's school clothes as he entered. "Another broken piece of farming equipment?" she asked, with a tired smile. Tom shook his head and placed the fragment on their wooden table. In the lamplight, the strange symbols seemed to glow faintly. Maria gasped and dropped her needle. "Is that what I think it is?" "I don't know," Tom said, "but I think we need to find out." That night, after their son Peter was asleep, Tom and Maria examined the fragment more closely. Using an old magnifying glass, they could see that the symbols weren't just decoration. They were part of some kind of data storage system, incredibly small and complex. Tom had worked on enough alien machines to recognize technology when he saw it, but this was different. This felt human. The next day, Tom took the fragment to his neighbor, old Eric Hansen. Eric had been a maintenance worker on one of the orbital stations before the Dominion decided humans were too unreliable for such important work. If anyone could figure out what the fragment contained, it would be Eric. Eric's workshop was hidden in his barn, carefully shielded from Dominion sensors. The old man had managed to keep some human-made diagnostic equipment over the years, claiming it was for repairing farm machinery. In reality, Eric ran a small communication network for the scattered human communities, passing messages and news that the Dominion preferred to keep secret. When Tom showed him the fragment, Eric's weathered face went pale. "Where did you find this?" he whispered. "In my north field. My plow hit something buried deep. There might be more." Eric connected the fragment to his jury-rigged computer system. The screen flickered, then filled with cascading data. Maps, technical specifications, personnel records, all in the old Earth languages that the Dominion had tried so hard to erase. "This is from the battleship Defiance," Eric breathed. "She was Admiral Morrison's flagship at Titan's Gate. According to this, she went down fighting, but not before launching her data cores toward the rim worlds." Tom leaned closer to the screen. "What kind of data?" "Everything. Fleet positions, tactical analysis, communication codes, and look at this." Eric pointed to a string of coordinates. "Jump vectors for the evacuation fleet. Tom, this might be the location of the Ghost Fleet." The Ghost Fleet. Every human had heard the stories, though most dismissed them as wishful thinking. The legend said that when Earth fell, a small fleet of military and civilian ships had escaped the final battle and fled beyond the galaxy's edge. They were supposed to be building their strength out there in the dark, waiting for the right moment to return and liberate their people. "We have to tell the others," Tom said. Eric nodded grimly, "but carefully. If the Dominion finds out about this, they'll glass New Haven from orbit. They've done it before." Over the next few days, Eric used his hidden network to contact other human settlements. The response was immediate and intense. Within a week, representatives from dozens of worlds were secretly traveling to New Haven, all desperate to see the data cores for themselves. Kate Morrison arrived on a grain transport, disguised as a migrant worker. She was Admiral Morrison's great-granddaughter and the unofficial leader of the Terran resistance. When she saw the data from her ancestor's ship, tears ran down her scarred face. "He kept his promise," she whispered. "He said he would find a way to get word to us, and he did." But their joy was short-lived. On the 5th day after Kate's arrival, Dominion patrol ships appeared in New Haven's sky. Not the usual customs inspectors or tax collectors, but full military vessels bristling with weapons. The message from the lead ship was broadcast across the entire planet. "By order of the Dominion Council, New Haven has been designated a compliance risk. All residents will report for immediate relocation processing." Tom knew what that meant. There would be no relocation. The Dominion had discovered their secret meetings, and now every human on New Haven was marked for death. Kate Morrison stood in the town square as the alien ships descended, her voice carrying over the emergency speakers that Eric had hidden throughout the settlement. "People of New Haven, people of Earth, the time for hiding is over. Today we take the first step toward reclaiming our birthright among the stars. Follow the old coordinates, find our lost brothers and sisters, and show the galaxy that humanity will never surrender." As the first energy beams lanced down from the sky, Tom gathered his family and ran for the hidden shuttles that the Resistance had prepared for exactly this moment. Behind them, their home of 3 centuries burned under alien fire. Ahead of them lay the unknown darkness between galaxies and the desperate hope that somewhere out there other humans were waiting with ships and weapons and the will to fight. The coordinates from the ancient data core were programmed into every escape. Ship's navigation system. If the Ghost Fleet was real, if the stories were true, then humanity's long exile was about to end. If not, then they would die free among the stars, rather than live as slaves on their knees. The last evacuation shuttle lifted off just as New Haven's capital city disappeared in a flash of white light. Tom held his son close and stared out at the infinite darkness ahead, where legends and hope waited in the void. The refugee fleet drifted through absolute darkness, 200 ships carrying the survivors of New Haven, and a dozen other worlds that had been destroyed in the Dominion's sudden crackdown. For 3 weeks they had traveled beyond the galaxy's edge, following coordinates that might lead to salvation or death. Fuel was running low, food reserves were nearly exhausted, and several of the older ships had already suffered critical system failures. Tom Walsh floated in the observation deck of the converted grain hauler that carried his family, watching the empty space outside with growing despair. His son Peter pressed against the viewport beside him, searching the darkness for any sign of hope. "Are we lost, Dad?" Peter asked. Before Tom could answer, every ship in the fleet suddenly shuddered, as their sensors detected something massive approaching from the depths of the nebula ahead. Emergency lights flickered on throughout the refugee vessels as captains tried to determine if they were about to be rescued or destroyed. Then the ships appeared, not one or two, but hundreds of them, emerging from what had seemed like empty space with the silence of hunting wolves. They were clearly human in design, but unlike anything Tom had ever seen. These vessels were built for stealth and speed, their hulls covered with materials that seemed to drink in starlight and give nothing back. A communications signal reached the refugee fleet, transmitted on an old Earth military frequency that hadn't been used in centuries. The voice that spoke was crisp, professional, and entirely human. "Unknown vessels, you are entering the territorial space of the Free Human Alliance. State your origin and purpose." Kate Morrison was the first to respond, from the fleet's command ship. "This is Kate Morrison representing the Terran Resistance. We carry refugees from Dominion persecution, seeking the Ghost Fleet." There was a long pause before the voice replied. "Kate Morrison, great-granddaughter of Admiral James Morrison, hero of Titan's Gate. I am Admiral Rex Foster. Welcome to the Deep Black, Kate. Welcome home." The refugee ships were guided to a massive asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into a docking facility. As Tom's family disembarked, they found themselves in a bustling spaceport that rivaled anything they had seen in Dominion space. Humans in clean uniforms moved with purpose and pride, operating advanced technology that somehow felt familiar despite being centuries ahead of anything the refugees had ever used. Admiral Foster met them in the main terminal, a tall man with silver hair and eyes that held depths of experience. He wore a simple blue uniform with no decorations except a small patch showing Earth rising over Luna. 300 years we've been out here," he told the assembled refugees. 300 years of building, learning, growing stronger. We are the children of those who refused to kneel, the heirs of those who chose exile over slavery. Tom stepped forward, still clutching the ancient data fragment that had started everything. "Sir, we brought this from New Haven. It has tactical information, fleet positions from the old war." Foster examined the fragment with reverence. "The Defiance's final gift. We wondered if any of the data cores had survived." He looked up at Tom with something approaching hope in his eyes. "Tell me, what is the condition of our people in Dominion space?" Kate Morrison answered with barely controlled anger. "Starving, oppressed, worked to death in alien mines and factories. The Dominion treats us like animals, and too many humans have accepted it as the natural order." A murmur of disgust ran through the assembled Free Human Alliance personnel. Foster raised his hand for silence. "We have watched from the shadows," he said. "We have seen the suffering, felt the pain of our scattered people, but we also saw their submission, their willingness to accept alien rule in exchange for mere survival. We began to wonder if the human spirit had been broken forever." "It hasn't," Tom said firmly. "New Haven died fighting. Dozens of other worlds have sent their bravest souls here rather than submit. The spirit is still there, Admiral. It just needs something to believe in again." Over the following days, the refugees were given tours of the Free Human Alliance's hidden civilization. What they saw defied imagination. Entire asteroid belts had been converted into industrial complexes. Mobile space cities housed millions of humans who had never known alien oppression. Most incredible of all, massive shipyards were constructing vessels that incorporated the best of human engineering with technologies that the void-born humans had developed during their long exile. Dr. Lisa Santos, a xenobiologist who had spent decades hiding among alien populations before escaping to join the refugees, was particularly impressed by the medical facilities. "You've eliminated most of the genetic diseases that plague our people in Dominion space," she observed during a tour of the research stations. "We've had time to perfect what we started," replied Dr. Michael Park, the chief medical officer. "Out. Here we could focus on healing instead of just surviving." But not everyone in the Free Human Alliance welcomed the refugees with open arms. Commander Sarah Chen had been born in the void between galaxies and had never set foot on a planet. She represented a significant faction that viewed the planet-born humans with suspicion. "They've lived as servants for centuries," she argued during a heated council meeting that Tom was allowed to observe. "They've forgotten how to fight, how to think like free people. Bringing them here risks exposure of everything we've built." "They came here," Foster replied. "That took courage. They abandoned everything they knew to chase a 300-year-old hope across the darkness between galaxies. That's not the action of broken slaves." To prove the refugees' worth, Foster authorized a series of reconnaissance missions back into Dominion space. Tom volunteered for the first mission, along with several other planet-born humans and a team of void-born specialists. Their goal was to gather current intelligence on Dominion military strength and to make contact with resistance groups on other human worlds. The mission used one of the Alliance's most advanced stealth ships, a vessel that could phase partially out of normal space to avoid detection. Tom found himself working alongside Commander Alex Cooper, a void-born human whose great-grandfather had been a fighter pilot in Earth's final defense. "Your people," Cooper said, as they approached their first target, a human mining colony in the Kepler system. "Do they really want freedom, or do they just want better conditions under alien rule?" Tom thought of his burning home, of the children who would never see New Haven's red sunsets again. "They want their children to grow up free," he said. "Same as anyone." The mining colony was a revelation of horror. Humans worked 18-hour shifts in toxic environments, while alien overseers lived in luxury domes above the surface. Medical care was minimal, education was forbidden, and any display of human culture was punished with public execution. But even here, resistance existed. A network of miners had been secretly communicating with other human worlds, spreading news, and keeping hope alive. When Tom made contact with their leader, a woman named Beth Rodriguez, her reaction was immediate and intense. "The ghost fleet is real," she whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-stained face. "It's real," Tom confirmed, "and they're ready to fight." The intelligence gathered on the mission was sobering. The Dominion had grown complacent during their centuries of unopposed rule. Their military forces were spread thin across thousands of systems designed more for intimidation than actual warfare. More importantly, the 4 alien species that made up the Dominion were held together by mutual fear and ancient grudges rather than genuine unity. When Tom returned to the Deep Black, he brought more than intelligence. He brought volunteers. Dozens of humans had joined the mission, abandoning their lives of servitude to take their chances with the legendary Ghost Fleet. Admiral Foster gathered his senior staff to review the findings. The holographic displays showed Dominion Fleet, positions, resource allocation, and communication networks in unprecedented detail. "They're vulnerable," Foster announced. "More vulnerable than they've been in millennia, but they're still vastly superior in numbers and technology." "Not all technology," corrected Chief Engineer Paul Kim, gesturing to readouts from the stealth ship's performance. "Our phase shift systems are beyond anything they have. Our ships can appear anywhere in their territory without warning." Kate Morrison studied the tactical displays with the eye of someone who had spent her life fighting impossible odds. "We don't need to match their numbers," she said slowly. "We just need to break their unity. Hit each species where they're strongest. Make them doubt each other." Foster nodded grimly. "The question is whether we're ready to abandon 3 centuries of safety for a war that might destroy us all." Tom stood up in the council chamber, surrounded by people who had been legends to him just weeks before. "Admiral, with respect, we're already being destroyed. One world at a time, one generation at a time. At least this way, we die fighting." The decision was unanimous. The Free Human Alliance would emerge from hiding and take the war directly to the Dominion. But first, they would need allies, weapons, and most importantly, the courage to risk everything they had built for the chance, to reclaim what they had lost. The Ghost Fleet was about to become very real indeed. Deep in the heart of the converted asteroid that served as the Free Human Alliance's primary command center, Paul Kim worked with desperate intensity on humanity's greatest technological challenge. Around him, hundreds of engineers and technicians labored day and night to prepare for a war that would determine the fate of their species. The machine before Kim defied easy description. Part shipyard, part laboratory, part factory. It was humanity's attempt to level a playing field that had been tilted against them for 3 centuries. The device could take the raw materials from captured Dominion ships and reshape them into something entirely new, something that combined the best of human ingenuity with alien technology. "The phase generators are stable," reported Dr. Emily Watson, Kim's deputy, and one of the most brilliant minds the Void-born had produced. "We can now shift an entire destroyer-class vessel out of normal space for up to 6 hours. Kim nodded, but didn't look up from his work. Every hour counted now. Intelligence from Tom Walsh's reconnaissance missions had revealed that the Dominion was planning something called the Final Compliance Protocol. Translated from alien bureaucratic language, it meant the complete extermination of humanity within the next 6 months. "How many ships can we field?" Kim asked. 1,800 combat-capable vessels," Watson replied, "plus support craft and the civilian evacuation fleet, 1,800 ships against the Dominion's estimated 50,000. The numbers were impossible, but humanity had faced impossible odds before. Across the asteroid complex, Captain Lisa Romano studied intelligence reports with the methodical precision that had once made her one of the Dominion's most effective compliance officers. Her defection after witnessing the New Haven massacre had cost her everything she had built in her former life, but it had given the human resistance something invaluable: detailed knowledge of how the alien alliance actually functioned. "The key is timing," she explained to a group of strike force commanders gathered around a holographic display of the galaxy. "The Dominion species hate each other almost as much as they fear losing control. The hegemony thinks the other 3 are weak. The collective believes it's the only truly logical species. The consortium considers physical beings to be fundamentally inferior. The swarm sees everyone else as inefficient resource wasters." Tom Walsh, now wearing the uniform of an Alliance colonel, studied the tactical data with eyes that had grown hard during his time in the Void. His family was safe in one of the deep shelters, but millions of other human families remained trapped in Dominion space with time running out. "How do we use their hatred against them?" he asked. Romano smiled grimly. "We make each species think. The others are betraying them. The hegemony will respond to any threat with overwhelming force, which will alarm the collective's risk assessment algorithms. The collective will try to impose logic on an emotional situation, which will frustrate the consortium's desire for elegant solutions. The consortium will attempt to coordinate a response through their psychic network, which will trigger the swarm's fear of mental domination." "And while they're fighting each other?" asked Commander Cooper, representing the Void-born military leadership. "We hit them where it hurts most," Admiral Foster said as he entered the briefing room. 4 simultaneous strikes on their core systems, each one designed to cripple their primary strength while appearing to come from one of their supposed allies. The plan that emerged from weeks of intensive preparation was audacious beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Operation Starburst would launch 4 separate fleets, each equipped with captured and modified Dominion technology that would make their attacks appear to originate from one of the other alien species. But the human forces would not fight alone. Dr. Maria Santos had spent the past month making contact with representatives of the dozens of species that the Dominion had conquered over the millennia. Her background in xenobiology and her years of hiding among alien populations had given her unique insights into the psychology of oppressed peoples. "They're all waiting for someone to make the first move," she reported to the War Council. The Kerrigan Collective was conquered 800 years ago and forced into industrial slavery. The nomad tribes lost their homeworld to Dominion strip mining. The Silicon Courts have been denied the right to expand their digital consciousness. All of them have populations that would rise up if they believed victory was possible. Kate Morrison coordinated the communication networks that would synchronize the uprising. Using modified consortium psychic relay technology, the human forces could coordinate with resistance groups across thousands of light years in real time. "The Dominion's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness," she explained to a gathering of human civilians who had volunteered for support roles. "They've grown so powerful that they can't imagine anyone challenging them. They've become arrogant, complacent. That gives us the element of surprise. But even with alien allies and captured technology, the humans faced seemingly impossible challenges. The Dominion's military forces were not only numerous but experienced. They had crushed hundreds of rebellions over the centuries and developed tactics specifically designed to break the will of uprising populations. The solution came from an unexpected source. Peter Walsh, Tom's teenage son, had been studying the historical records of human military doctrine during Earth's final war. While adults focused on advanced technology and complex strategies, Peter had been reading about something simpler and more fundamental. "Dad," he said one evening as Tom reviewed attack plans for the 100th time, "why are we trying to fight like them?" "What do you mean?" "The Dominion fights big battles with huge fleets and massive weapons. But humans never did that, even when we had big fleets. We fought smart. We used terrain. We adapted. We made the enemy fight our kind of war instead of theirs." Tom stared at his son, then at the tactical displays showing neat formation movements and conventional engagement patterns. Peter was right. Humanity was planning to fight exactly the kind of war the Dominion expected and was prepared for. The realization led to a complete revision of the attack plan. Instead of trying to match alien formations and tactics, the human forces would do what humans had always done best: improvise, adapt, and turn their weaknesses into strengths. The new strategy emphasized speed over firepower, intelligence over brute force, and most importantly, unpredictability over conventional military doctrine. Human ships would operate in small groups, appearing without warning, striking critical targets, and disappearing before the enemy could respond effectively. But the final element of the plan required a sacrifice that no one wanted to make. The attack on the Dominion would succeed only if every human world in their territory rose up simultaneously. That meant revealing the existence of the Free Human Alliance and the hidden coordinates to people who had lived under alien surveillance for centuries. "Some of our people will be captured," Foster warned during the final planning session. "Some will be tortured for information. Some will break under pressure and reveal everything they know about our locations and capabilities." "Then we'd better win quickly," Tom replied, "because if we lose, it won't matter what they reveal. There won't be any humans left to betray." The final preparations took on an air of desperate urgency. Engineers worked around the clock to complete modifications to the human fleet. Pilots trained in simulators that pushed the limits of human endurance. Intelligence officers memorized details about alien psychology and command structures. In the deep shelters, human civilians prepared for the possibility that their hidden sanctuary might be discovered and destroyed. Children were taught emergency procedures and given memory recordings of human history and culture in case they became the last remnants of their species. Kate Morrison stood before a communications array that could reach every human settlement in the galaxy. In just a few hours, she would transmit the signal that would either begin humanity's liberation or seal their final doom. "Any regrets?" asked Admiral Foster as he joined her in the communications center. Kate thought of New Haven burning, of the children who would grow up free or not at all, of the ancestors who had fought impossible battles among the stars. "Just one," she said. "That it took us 300 years to remember who we are." Outside the asteroid complex, the human fleet prepared for departure. 1,800 ships carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire species, ready to challenge an empire that had ruled the galaxy since before humanity learned to make fire. The storm was about to break across the stars, and for the first time in centuries, it would be a human storm. The first sign of the rebellion came not from human weapons, but from silence. Across 12 star systems, Dominion communication networks suddenly went dead as quantum viruses designed by captured collective technology began eating through their data streams. For the alien commanders accustomed to perfect information flow, the silence was more terrifying than any explosion. Tom Walsh felt his stolen hegemony cruiser shudder as it dropped out of phase space directly above the reptilian military command, world of Skartok Prime. Around him, his mixed crew of planet-born and void-born humans worked with deadly precision, their movements synchronized by months of desperate preparation. "All ships, this is Strike Group Delta," Tom transmitted to the 47 vessels under his command. "Remember, we're not here to win a fair fight. We're here to break their spirits and their communications, then disappear before they know what hit them." Below them, the hegemony's most important military installations sprawled across the surface of a world that had been shaped entirely for war. Massive fortress cities housed the alien commanders who directed campaigns across hundreds of star systems. Orbital weapons platforms that could crack planets hung in perfect geometric formations around the world. What the reptilian defenders didn't expect was for enemy ships to materialize inside their defensive perimeter without any warning. The human phase shift technology let Tom's fleet bypass every sensor array and weapon system the hegemony had positioned to protect their most valuable target. "Target the command spires first," Tom ordered. "Make it look like a collective precision strike. Use their own energy signatures and targeting patterns." The modified human weapons fired beams of crystalline energy that the hegemony computers would identify as coming from their collective allies. The alien commanders had exactly 30 seconds to wonder why their supposed partners were attacking them before the communications jamming systems activated and cut them off from the rest of the Dominion. 3,000 light-years away, Captain Lisa Romano was leading her own impossible mission against the collective's resource processing stations in the Crystal Nebula. Her ships used captured swarm biotechnology to deploy what appeared to be evolved virus strains designed specifically to corrupt crystalline data matrices. "The beauty of fighting the collective," Romano explained to her strike team as they watched. "Alien processing stations shut down in cascading system failures. Is that they're completely logical right up until they're not. Once their logic trees start corrupting, they can't adapt fast enough to save themselves." The crystalline beings who ran the processing stations sent desperate messages toward swarm territory, demanding to know why their insectoid partners had suddenly developed weapons capable of targeting collective vulnerabilities. But the messages were intercepted by human relay stations and redirected back with modifications that made them sound like threats rather than questions. In the gaseous depths of the Maelstrom cluster, Admiral Rex Foster led the most dangerous mission of all. The consortium's communication hubs were scattered throughout regions of space that could dissolve unprotected ships in minutes. But the Free Human Alliance had developed specialized vessels that could navigate the deadly environment. while deploying hunter-killer probes designed to mimic hegemony weapons technology. The consortium thinks in terms of elegant solutions and artistic warfare, Foster told his crew as they watched another psychic relay station disappear in what looked like a precisely targeted reptilian torpedo strike. They're about to discover that sometimes the most elegant solution is the one that comes from the barrel of a gun. The destruction of the communication hubs had effects that rippled across the consortium's distributed consciousness like cracks in a mirror. Individual cloud beings who had been part of a unified psychic network for millennia suddenly found themselves isolated and confused. Some tried to flee toward collective territory, convinced that the hegemony had decided to eliminate the gaseous species entirely. But it was the fourth strike that proved most devastating to Dominion unity. Colonel Alex Cooper led his forces against the swarm's hive worlds using weapons that appeared to be advanced consortium psychic disruptors. The effect on the insectoid aliens was immediate and catastrophic. The swarm operates on pheromone networks, more complex than anything we fully understand, Cooper reported as his ships watched millions of worker-caste insects turning on their overseers. But we don't need to understand it completely. We just need to disrupt it enough to cause chaos. The biological agents deployed by Cooper's team broke down the chemical signals that held swarm society together. Without the constant flow of pheromone commands from their leaders, worker castes began operating on base instincts that had been suppressed for thousands of years. Some tried to establish independent colonies. Others attacked facilities they had been programmed to protect. Many simply wandered in confused circles, waiting for orders that would never come. Within 6 hours of the coordinated attacks, the Dominion was in complete chaos. Each species believed that one or more of their partners had betrayed them. Military forces that should have been coordinating their response were instead accusing each other of treachery and preparing for internal warfare. But the human strikes were just the beginning. Across the galaxy, the suppressed populations that Dr. Maria Santos had contacted began their own uprisings. The timing was perfect because the Dominion forces were too confused and suspicious to coordinate an effective response. On the industrial world of Forge, the enslaved Kerrigan collective seized control of the weapons factories that had been producing arms for their oppressors. Within hours, those same weapons were being distributed to resistance groups on dozens of other worlds. In the asteroid mining fields of the Broken Crown system, the nomad tribes used their salvage ships to capture Dominion patrol vessels and turn them against their former masters. Their knowledge of spacecraft systems, gained through centuries of forced labor, made them devastatingly effective pirates. The Silicon Courts, denied the right to expand their digital consciousness for 800 years, suddenly found themselves with access to the collective's data networks as the crystalline being's security systems collapsed. Within hours, artificial intelligences that had been locked in digital prisons were spreading through Dominion computer systems like wildfire. But the aliens adapted faster than the humans had hoped. The hegemony deployed their dreadnought fleets, massive vessels capable of destroying entire star systems rather than risk letting rebellions spread. The collective began implementing quantum firewalls that could resist the human virus attacks. Individual consortium entities developed independent communication methods that bypassed their corrupted psychic network. The swarm started breeding new warrior castes specifically designed to hunt human infiltrators. Tom Walsh found himself commanding the evacuation of 3 human colony worlds as hegemony dreadnoughts moved to implement what they called sterilization protocols. His small fleet of converted cargo ships and captured patrol boats was no match for the alien warships, but it didn't need to be. "We're not trying to win," he reminded his captains as they prepared to face impossible odds. "We're trying to buy time for our people to escape and for the other species to keep fighting." The battle above New Geneva lasted 18 hours and cost the human forces 60% of their ships, but it achieved its objective. When the hegemony dreadnoughts finally broke through the desperate defense, they found empty cities and evacuated settlements. The humans they had come to exterminate were already scattered across a dozen different systems, carrying word of the rebellion to worlds that had never dared to hope for freedom. Lisa Romano faced a different challenge as collective. Logic algorithms began adapting to her virus attacks. The crystalline beings were methodically rebuilding their data networks with new security protocols that could identify and neutralize human intrusion attempts. "They're learning too fast," she reported during a brief communication window with Alliance Command. "We need to escalate or we're going to lose the advantage." The escalation came in the form of Operation Cascade, a desperate gambit that used captured consortium psychic technology to broadcast chaotic emotional patterns directly into collective data streams. The crystalline beings, who prided themselves on perfect logical analysis, suddenly found their networks flooded with anger, fear, hope, and desperation. The result was spectacular. Collective processing stations across 3 sectors began generating random outputs as their logic trees tried to incorporate emotional variables into mathematical equations. Some facilities started producing art instead of industrial components. Others began composing what could only be described as poetry in crystalline matrix language. Admiral Foster's campaign against the consortium faced the opposite problem. As individual cloud beings lost contact with their collective consciousness, some became more dangerous rather than less. Freed from the constraints of group decision-making, these isolated entities began developing increasingly radical and destructive responses to what they perceived as systematic betrayal by their physical allies. "A consortium entity operating alone is like a force of nature," Foster warned his fleet commanders during a tactical briefing conducted while under fire from what appeared to be a sentient storm system. "They don't think in terms of acceptable losses or proportional responses. They just want to make the pain stop, and they don't care what they have to destroy to accomplish that." The breakthrough came when human infiltrators managed to establish communication with some of the isolated consortium entities. Instead of trying to fight or deceive them, the humans offered something the gaseous beings had never experienced: genuine sympathy for their confusion and fear. "We know what it's like to be cut off from everything you've ever known," transmitted Dr. Santos from her position aboard Foster's flagship. "We know what it's like to lose your connection to your own people and wonder if you'll ever find your way home again." The response was immediate and surprising. Several consortium entities stopped their destructive rampages and began providing intelligence about Dominion fleet movements and strategic planning. They had spent centuries as the communication backbone of the alien alliance, and they knew secrets that could cripple the remaining loyal forces. But the most significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Alex Cooper's disruption of the swarm hive networks had created something unprecedented in insectoid society: individual thought. For the first time in their species' history, worker caste insects were making independent decisions rather than following pheromone commands. Some of these newly independent insects sought out human contact, driven by curiosity about the species that had accidentally given them free will. What they revealed shocked even the most optimistic human commanders. "The Dominion isn't just an alliance," reported one insectoid defector through a translation device improvised from collective technology. "It's a prison. Our leaders, your leaders, everyone's leaders are trapped in roles they can't escape. The hegemony wants to end the wars but can't show weakness. The collective wants to explore new ideas but can't risk illogical behavior. The consortium wants individual expression but can't abandon collective responsibility. The swarm wants to create instead of just produce but can't break the work patterns." This intelligence led to a complete revision of human strategy. Instead of trying to destroy the Dominion through military force, the rebellion began targeting the psychological and social structures that held the alien alliance together. Human propaganda broadcasts, transmitted through captured communication networks, began reaching ordinary citizens of all 4 species. The messages didn't call for violence, or revolution. Instead, they simply asked questions. Why do you fight wars for leaders who despise you? Why do you produce resources for beings who consider you inferior? Why do you follow orders from creatures who deny your individual worth? The effect was gradual but devastating. Across the galaxy, ordinary aliens began questioning the fundamental assumptions of Dominion society. Some refused to report for mandatory labor assignments. Others demanded explanations for military orders that seemed to serve no purpose except maintaining control. Many simply stopped participating in the systems that kept their oppressive society functioning. The Dominion leadership's response was predictably brutal. Hegemony forces began implementing loyalty protocols that involved executing randomly selected civilians to maintain discipline. Collective processing stations started categorizing independent thought as a virus to be eliminated. Consortium entities attempted to re-establish psychic control through forced neural linking. Swarm overseers released new pheromone combinations designed to suppress individual consciousness, but it was too late. The ideas of freedom and individual worth, once introduced, spread faster than any military advance. The rebellion had become something far more dangerous than an armed uprising. It had become a revolution of consciousness that threatened to unmake the very foundations of the ancient alien order. Tom Walsh watched from his command ship as hegemony dreadnoughts turned their weapons on their own colony worlds rather than risk the spread of revolutionary ideas. The sight filled him with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. The Dominion was destroying itself rather than face the possibility of change. Status report from all strike groups, he requested, as his fleet prepared for what intelligence suggested would be the final phase of the conflict. Strike Group Alpha reports 70% losses but mission objectives achieved, came Foster's voice over the communication link. The hegemony military command structure is completely fragmented. Individual commanders are making decisions based on personal survival rather than strategic doctrine. Strike Group Beta has successfully corrupted approximately 40% of collective data networks, Romano added. They're spending more resources fighting our viruses than supporting military operations. Strike Group Gamma has established communication with 63 independent consortium entities, Cooper reported. Several have agreed to provide intelligence in exchange for guarantees of post-war autonomy. Strike Group Delta has documented uprising activity on over 400 worlds, Tom concluded. But the cost is getting higher every day. The Dominion is implementing scorched earth policies rather than accept defeat. Kate Morrison's voice cut through the tactical chatter with grim determination. Then we end this before they can destroy everything we're fighting to save. All strike groups prepare for final offensive operations. Target the Nexus. The Nexus was the ancient space station where the 4 Dominion species had first signed their alliance treaty 3,000 years ago. It served as both a symbol of their unity and the actual seat of their government. Every major decision affecting the galaxy was made in the Nexus Council chambers. It was also the most heavily defended location in known space, protected by the combined fleets of all 4 species and surrounded by weapon systems that could annihilate entire armadas. "Sir," asked one of Tom's junior officers, "how exactly do we attack something that's essentially impregnable?" Tom looked at the tactical displays showing the impossible defenses surrounding the Nexus, then at the scattered human forces that had fought impossible odds for months and somehow survived. "The same way we've done everything else," he replied. "We don't fight fair, we don't fight the way they expect, and we don't give up until every human in the galaxy is free." The final battle for the future of the galaxy was about to begin. And for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity would be the ones setting the terms of engagement. The Nexus hung in space like a monument to absolute power. It's crystalline, spires and organic chambers growing from a central core that had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. For 3 millennia, This ancient station had been the heart of Dominion authority, where four species had learned to suppress their mutual hatred long enough to dominate the galaxy. Tom Walsh stood in the cramped command center of his assault shuttle, watching the impossible fortress grow larger through the viewport. Around him, 23 volunteers from across human space made final preparations for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. They carried no heavy weapons, no advanced technology, no realistic hope of military victory. What they carried was something far more dangerous: the truth. "Remind me again why we're not just blowing this place up?" asked Lieutenant Mark Chen, a Void-born pilot whose family had spent 3 centuries dreaming of this moment. "Because destroying the Nexus won't solve anything," Tom replied, checking his equipment one final time. The Dominion isn't just a government or a military alliance. It's an idea that's infected the entire galaxy. The idea that some species are naturally superior to others, that strength gives the right to rule, that freedom is a luxury only the powerful can afford. Through the communication system, Kate Morrison's voice reached them from the human command ship hidden in the outer system. Final intelligence update. Dominion forces are converging on the Nexus from all directions. They know this is where we're headed, and they're prepared to sacrifice everything to stop us. Indeed, the sensor readings showed a nightmare of military power gathering around the ancient station. Hegemony dreadnoughts formed defensive lines that could vaporize planets. Collective battle platforms deployed quantum weapons that could unravel matter at the subatomic level. Consortium war clouds prepared to unleash psychic storms that could drive entire crews insane. Swarm carrier vessels released billions of biomechanical fighters designed specifically to hunt human targets. "Sir," reported the shuttle pilot, "we're detecting massive energy buildups throughout the system. They're preparing to activate some kind of superweapon." Tom had been expecting this. Intelligence from defector sources had warned that the Dominion possessed ancient weapons of mass destruction, relics from the wars that had originally driven the four species together in their defensive alliance. Rather than risk losing control of the galaxy, the alien leadership was prepared to sterilize entire sectors and rebuild civilization according to their specifications. "Time to completion?" Tom asked. "Approximately 4 hours until they can target human territory. 6 hours until they can reach the Outer Rim colonies." Tom activated the emergency communication channel that connected him to every human ship in the galaxy. "This is Colonel Tom Walsh to all human forces. The Dominion is preparing to implement total extermination protocols. If we fail here, if we don't succeed in the next few hours, then every human world will be destroyed rather than allowed to remain free." He paused, thinking of his son Peter, safe in the deep shelters, but facing a future where humanity might exist only in scattered refugee fleets hiding in the darkness between galaxies. "But we're not going to fail," Tom continued. "Not because we're stronger than they are, not because we have better weapons or superior technology. We're going to succeed because we remember something they've forgotten. We remember that freedom isn't something you take from others. It's something you give to yourself." The assault shuttle and its escorts approached the Nexus, using every stealth technology the human alliance had developed. Phase shift generators kept them partially outside normal space. Holographic projectors made them appear to be debris from the ongoing battles throughout the system. Captured Dominion identification codes convinced automated defenses that they were friendly supply vessels. But as they neared the station's docking bays, the deceptions began to fail. Alert signals echoed through the Nexus's communication networks as alien sensor operators detected anomalies in the approaching craft. "We're blown," reported the pilot, as defensive weapons began targeting their small fleet. "Should I abort the approach?" "Negative," Tom replied, watching as 3 of their escort ships disappeared in flashes of alien fire. "We knew this was one way from the beginning. Get us to that docking bay." The shuttle bucked and shuddered as energy beams seared through its hull plating. Emergency systems screamed warnings about multiple system failures and imminent structural collapse. But somehow, The small craft managed to crash land in one of the Nexus's maintenance bays just as its engines finally gave out completely. Tom and his team emerged from the wreckage to find themselves in a vast chamber that seemed to exist in 4 different dimensions simultaneously. Hegemony architecture of metal and stone intersected with collective crystal matrices that grew through consortium energy fields, while swarm biomechanical components provided organic connections between the disparate elements. "This place feels wrong," muttered Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's xenobiologist and cultural specialist. "It's like they've tried to force 4 completely different ways of existing into the same space." "That's exactly what they've done," Tom replied, consulting the intelligence data they had gathered over months of desperate fighting, "and that's why it's vulnerable." The route to the Central Council chamber led through sections of the station that had been designed by each of the 4 species. The hegemony corridors were fortified passages meant to channel attackers into killing zones. The collective areas were maze-like puzzles requiring mathematical solutions to navigate. The consortium regions existed partially outside normal space and could only be traversed by beings capable of psychic awareness. The swarm sections were living ecosystems that responded to pheromone signals and biological markers. But Tom's team had prepared for exactly these challenges. Using intelligence provided by defectors from all 4 species, they had developed strategies for bypassing each type of defensive system. More importantly, they had learned to exploit the fundamental incompatibilities between the different alien approaches to security. The breakthrough came when they reached a junction point where all 4 architectural styles intersected. Dr. Kim activated a device that had been constructed using technology from every Dominion species, creating what she called a translation field that could communicate simultaneously in reptilian aggression displays, crystalline logic patterns, gaseous emotional resonances, and insectoid pheromone signals. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Security systems designed by different species began receiving conflicting information about the intruder's identity and threat level. Hegemony sensors identified them as collective maintenance drones. Collective scanners classified them as authorized consortium entities. Consortium detectors registered them as friendly swarm bioforms. Swarm monitors recognized them as legitimate hegemony personnel. Unable to resolve the contradictory data, the station's security network effectively shut down, allowing the human team to proceed directly to their target. The Central Council chamber was a spherical room at the heart of the Nexus, where representatives of the 4 species had met for 3,000 years to plan the subjugation of the galaxy. When Tom and his team entered, they found the chamber in session, with the highest-ranking leaders of each species arguing frantically about how to respond to the human rebellion. The aliens turned as the humans entered, their reactions revealing the fundamental differences that had always divided them despite their alliance. The hegemony representatives immediately reached for weapons, their reptilian instincts demanding violent solutions to unexpected problems. The collective beings began calculating probability matrices for various responses, their crystalline forms flickering as they processed enormous amounts of data. The consortium entities expanded into defensive configurations, preparing to launch psychic attacks against the intruders. The swarm overseers released pheromone signals that would normally summon warrior castes to eliminate threats. But Tom wasn't there to fight. Instead, he activated the device that Dr. Kim had prepared for this moment, a combination broadcaster and holographic projector that could display information in formats comprehensible to all 4 species simultaneously. "Before you kill us," Tom said, his words being translated into reptilian threat postures, crystalline mathematical concepts, gaseous emotional patterns, and insectoid chemical signals, "there's something you need to see." The device projected historical records that the human intelligence teams had discovered in ancient archives throughout Dominion space. The records told a story that none of the current alien leadership had ever heard, because it had been classified and buried for millennia. The 4 species had not originally been conquerors. They had been refugees, fleeing from an ancient enemy that had destroyed their original homeworlds. Their alliance had been formed not for conquest but for mutual survival against a threat that had seemed unstoppable. But that enemy was long dead, extinct for over 2,000 years. The Dominion had continued their military expansion not because they faced any real threat, but because their leaders had forgotten why they had started fighting in the first place. "You've spent 3 millennia conquering the galaxy to protect yourselves from ghosts," Tom said as the historical evidence played out before the stunned alien representatives. "You've enslaved hundreds of species, destroyed thousands of worlds, and murdered billions of innocent beings because you were afraid of an enemy that died out before humans learned to write." The reaction was immediate and predictable. The hegemony representatives roared denials and accusations of human lies. The collective beings attempted to verify the data through their networks, only to discover that the historical records had been authenticated using their own most sophisticated analysis systems. The consortium entities began projecting waves of confusion and disbelief. The swarm overseers released stress pheromones that indicated complete psychological breakdown. But the damage was done. The truth, once revealed, could not be hidden again. Throughout the Nexus, throughout the Dominion fleet, throughout the Alien Alliance, the historical records spread through communication networks that had been designed to share information instantly across the galaxy. Within minutes, every alien in the Dominion knew that their entire civilization had been built on a lie, that their oppression of other species had been based on fear of a threat that no longer existed. The effect was exactly what Tom had hoped for, and exactly what he had feared. The ancient alliance shattered instantly as each species began blaming the others for perpetuating the deception. Hegemony forces turned their weapons on collective installations. Collective battle platforms began targeting consortium communication nodes. Consortium entities launched psychic attacks against swarm hive networks. Swarm fighters swarmed against hegemony dreadnoughts. In the council chamber, the alien representatives abandoned all pretense of unity and began attacking each other with a fury that had been suppressed for 3,000 years. Tom and his team took shelter behind an overturned conference table as energy beams, crystal shards, psychic storms, and bioweapons filled the air. But even as the Dominion tore itself apart, Tom knew that the victory was incomplete. The superweapons were still charging, still preparing to sterilize human space rather than allow the rebellion to succeed. Someone had to prevent their activation, and the control systems were scattered throughout different sections of the station. "We need to split up," Tom told his team as alien civil war raged around them. "Each of you take a section and disable the weapon systems. Use whatever methods work, but stop those weapons from firing." It was a death sentence for all of them, and everyone knew it. The station was coming apart as its different sections fought each other, and there was no way a human could survive long enough to reach all 4 weapons control centers. But they tried anyway, because that's what humans did. They tried impossible things for impossible reasons, and sometimes, just sometimes, they succeeded. Dr. Kim managed to reach the Collective Weapons Control Center and used her translation device to convince the crystalline control systems that the superweapons posed an unacceptable logical paradox. Lieutenant Chen reached the Hegemony Center and triggered a command override using stolen reptilian authorization codes. Sergeant Lisa Park infiltrated the Swarm Center and released pheromone signals that convinced the biomechanical controls to shut down their systems. Tom himself fought his way to the Consortium Center, where he found something unexpected. Instead of weapons controls, he discovered the central consciousness that had been coordinating the 4 species for millennia. It was ancient beyond measure, a collective intelligence that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "Why?" the entity asked him, its voice echoing directly in his mind. "Why do you fight so hard for a freedom that will only lead to chaos and suffering?" Tom thought of his son, of the children on New Haven who had died in alien fire, of all the human worlds where families lived in fear and hopelessness. "Because freedom is worth chaos," he replied. "Because the right to make our own mistakes is more valuable than the security of being told what to do. Because even if we fail, even if we destroy ourselves, at least we'll do it as free beings making our own choices." The ancient consciousness was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, the superweapons powered down throughout the system. "Perhaps," the entity said, "it is time for a new experiment." The war ended not with a great battle, but with a simple choice. Faced with the truth about their history and the collapse of their ancient alliance, the four Dominion species chose to go their separate ways rather than continue a war that no longer had any purpose. Some fled to distant galaxies, carrying their hatred and fear with them. Others retreated to their original territories to rebuild their civilizations on new foundations. A few chose to remain and help establish something unprecedented in galactic history, a republic where all species, regardless of age or power, had equal representation. Tom Walsh returned to New Haven, or rather to the new settlement that bore the same name on a world far from the ashes of the old one. His son Peter was waiting for him, along with his wife Maria and thousands of other humans who had dreamed of seeing their homeworld again. But the New Haven was different from the old one. It was built not just by humans, but by representatives of dozens of species who had chosen freedom over the security of oppression. In the fields, where Tom had once grown grain for alien masters, children of a dozen different worlds now played together under alien suns. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the price of freedom. It was paid not just in blood and sacrifice, but in the courage to trust others with the right to make their own choices, even when those choices might lead to conflict or failure. Tom stood in his new fields one evening, watching the stars emerge in an alien sky, and realized that humanity had finally found its place among them. Not as conquerors or victims, but as gardeners of liberty, tending the seeds of freedom wherever they chose to grow.